How do you run a profitable creative business and still have fun?
Do you ever wish life had an undo button? Walking the balance between business and the creative life can be hard. But Matt and Shelby are here to attempt to answer the tough questions, so you don't need an undo. Presented by Made by Things. This is the CMD-Z Show.
And we're back with another exciting episode of the CMD-Z Show. Shelby, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Not pretty good. Doing great.
I am not pretty good.
I'm fantastic. It's a Tuesday, 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. Not for you, but...
Nope, 11 a.m. I'm in the future.
I'm a time traveler. I'm in the past. Let's see here.
Nice. Awesome. Well, any other chit chat before we jump into this?
How's the weather, Matt?
The weather is beautiful today. It is March 5th as we are recording this. And it was 70 degrees last night. It's supposed to be warm again today.
Nice. You're pretty good here,
but
too.
sometimes my computer will tell me like the weather on the bottom taskbar or like what to expect. And earlier today it said temperatures plummeting soon. I'm like, oh geez.
No, not again.
I don't know what that means exactly, but it might be just a bit dramatic. We'll see.
If it's going to be nice out, it has to stay nice out. I don't want it to go back. These little cold blips.
Yep.
I'm not having it. Make a decision.
Yep. It's true.
Yep.
All right. Well, we talked about weather. We have this concludes the small talk portion of our podcast. Thank you for joining. All right, let's get into the meat of our discussion today.
Yes.
Shelby, I hear you have a question. Not you. You don't have a question. Somebody else has a question. Let's hear it.
We received a question, which is very fun. And just so you all know, you can always send us a question via LinkedIn, or I believe you can do it on the website. So feel free to send us a question if you'd like us to chat about it. But Eric sent us. Yep, Eric sent us this one, and I'll just go ahead and read the full question, and then we'll condense. He says, "You ever just feel lost? Running a creative business is intense. Usually have a grip on mental wellness, but today hit me hard. I continually find myself trading so much time for little financial gain. Guess I'm just reaching out to see how you deal with running the business while profiting and having fun with what you do." So our big question of the day is, how do you run a profitable creative business and still have fun?
Oh, yes. So this was a question that Eric sent over LinkedIn, and immediately whenever we saw this question, it was, this deserves an episode.
Yeah.
This was not a simple answer here. Well, let me break this down just a little bit here. I'm going to start with that first line. Do you ever just feel lost? I think the obvious answer is yes, absolutely. I think everyone feels lost, not even just people trying to start and run a business.
Yeah.
But it's, for me, for the last, I made the decision that I wanted to be a business owner probably in 2009, maybe 2010, somewhere around there. And I started doing like small freelance projects while I was working full time, and just sort of built that up until I could finally make that leap.
Yeah.
And I remember, especially in those early times, it was like, how do you even do something like this? Like, you see people doing it and they make it look easy. Mm-hmm. But like, what are the steps that you're even supposed to take to do something like this? And I think it's really important for everyone to ask those kinds of questions early on, because it sort of conditions you for the questions that you're going to have to ask later as well.
Yeah.
Like this is not easy, right? Like it's not supposed to be easy. If it was easy, then everyone would do it.
Exactly.
And it's honestly almost like constantly feeling lost. But over time you sort of learn to just accept that, where it's like, okay, no, I don't know what I'm doing. But I guess for me, like, it was the realization that, okay, if I don't move somewhere, then I'm not progressing. So I would have rather moved in the wrong direction than not progress at all.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's the greatest approach, but that's just how I am, where I'm like, okay, I don't want to just think I know what the right and wrong answer are. I want to prove it to myself what the right and wrong answer is to a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that being said, constantly, especially early on, constantly reading books, trying to understand as much stuff as I could, constantly asking other people that I knew that may have done something similar. But I guess that's the thing, is that it's not a path that a lot of people go down. So when you do go down it, especially the farther down that path you go, the less people you have to sort of communicate with.
Yep.
Because it's just, I don't know, like it is kind of lonely. I know I'm making it sound absolutely awful right now. To me, being lonely isn't always a bad thing. Mm-hmm. I think that it's important to have those lonely periods to sort of reflect a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
And for me, like, I guess that's why I turned to writing. Like, that is how I become unlost at any point. Yeah. It's, if I can write enough about something, it's almost like I'm having a conversation with myself. It's almost like free therapy, I guess. And it's like free business therapy. That should be a thing. And it wasn't until I started really going all into writing where I started to feel less lonely and less lost with a lot of this stuff. But mm-hmm. I mean, that being said, again, there's still days where I'm like, I have no clue what to do next. Yep. And again, like, that's, especially when you get farther down this path, when you have employees, you have a team of 9 or 10 people. I mean, yes, you are the leader of this team and you need to have some of the answers. And yes, there's times where you feel absolutely lost, where you're like, I have no idea how to solve a situation or do a certain thing. And I guess that's just kind of what it takes to be good at this stuff, if that is important to you, is to find a way to become unlost at any of these moments. Allow yourself to get lost, right? Like, I think that's totally fine. I think that's a sign that you are pushing some real boundaries when you start to enter territory where not many people have been to before.
Agreed.
I guess it's sort of like how I always visualize this is, sort of like you're standing in a spot and there's all these possible paths and you can see all the paths before you start going in any direction. But there's fog in the distance, basically. So at first it's easy to take the first couple steps. So you can watch a simple YouTube video, you can read some books, and you can learn the first few steps to take. But again, the deeper into this sort of forbidden forest that you go into, the harder it is to see. And I don't know. I think it's just always really important to keep moving. Like, even if you're lost at that moment, the most important thing you can do is keep moving, because sometimes the path leads to a clearing of some kind. I'm really going deep in this.
You're in it. You are in the woods.
Metaphor here. I am in the woods right now. In the weeds. But there's moments of clarity throughout this path, and it's like, okay, well, if I keep moving, even if it's backwards, maybe I can at least get to just a point where I can kind of get my bearings and figure out which way to go next. I legit really visualize things like this. And sometimes, like, I don't know. It's almost like you kind of have this fear, like you are lost in the woods. Like this weird anxiety that can just completely roll over you the exact same way as if you were in the wilderness and don't know where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, survival situations are a little bit different, but they're very similar feelings. So, to just answer those first 5 words from this question, like, do you ever feel lost? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's a part of me that kind of gets this sounds bad, but like there's a thrill a little bit to being lost, I guess. Especially after you've found your way out of being lost before.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have that confidence that you understand and you know that you can get out of this.
Yep.
Even if you don't have the answers at that moment, if you've gotten unlost before, then you just, I don't know. It just doesn't feel like as big of a task to do it again, I guess. Any thoughts from you before I keep moving on?
Yeah, I think this is such an interesting thing because I remember when I was like first really like, okay, I'm going to be creative and this is what I'm going to do. You know, feeling that fear of like when one project ends and you don't know what you're doing next. You don't quite know where to go next. And I think that's with anything, is when you're kind of in that spot where I don't know what to do or where to go next, what path I should take if we're continuing on in our trip through the woods. I think that that's such a power though, because now when I am in that spot, it's like, oh, you know, this is the best place that I can be, is not quite know where to go next, because that positions me in a wonderful spot of choice. There are so many different paths that I could take. And just because you take one and it doesn't work, backtracking is 100% an option. We do that all the time in life. It's okay.
Right.
Just because one path doesn't work doesn't mean another one won't. And I think, I mean, for me, I love those moments where I can feel a little bit lost, because again, it is like, I suppose it's a lonely spot during that moment, but it does allow you to reflect, and you can think about those times of, how did I get here? What steps did I take? You know, what were the, you know, kind of the correct steps? What were some of the more, you know, maybe mistakes, I guess you could say? And how do I use what I've learned to point me down the correct path? How can I find that next spot on the trail that I'm supposed to be on? And I do think there's a lot of power in those moments when you're feeling lost, because that really defines exactly what you're going to be doing next.
Right. I mean, you said it really well there, but it defines, like, what you do next kind of defines a lot. Mm-hmm. More often than not, people that go down the path of business, they run into those lost times.
Yeah.
And they realize, this is not for me. I do not want to be lost like this. Yeah. And that's totally fine, right? It's for some people and it's not for others. But I guess I constantly see it's like that moment of struggle. Like, it's really easy to launch. It's real easy to probably land your first couple of clients.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like when the grand opening is no longer, and now you're just open. That's when the struggle really begins. And yeah, it's tough. But me personally, like, I don't regret any of it for a single moment, which I think is going to lead us into the kind of next portions here. So
yeah.
Continue to read the question here. Running a creative business is intense. I usually have a grip on mental wellness, but today it hit me hard. All right, let me talk there for a minute. We're really dissecting this whole question, but there's so much good stuff here. So, again, I'll say that from a mental wellness perspective, I do talk about this quite a bit. It is something that is important to me. It's not something that I have mastered or figured things out. I still have really difficult days, just like anyone else, I guess. Mm-hmm. But it's really easy to, when you get to those times when you're a little bit lost, to start sprinting. Yeah. And I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of like speaking from experience here, but like there's been times where it's just been really hard and I keep metaphorically running as fast as I possibly can, right? And just keep doing as much as I possibly can. And it will catch up with you one way or another. Mm-hmm. You have to stop sometimes. And I don't know, I guess, and I've talked about it in past episodes, so I'm not going to get too much into it, but like, it's tough to know that you're pushing yourself too far until after you've done it. And it's tough to, it's easy to remember when you've kind of pushed yourself to the point of burnout or panic attacks or just anything of the sort. But for me, it's, I don't know, you get to a point where you're like, okay, like I now know where the boundaries are. And then you pull back a bit on like, okay, maybe I'm not ready to be that far down the path. Maybe I need to come back a little bit. Mm-hmm. Or I don't know, maybe I need to do certain things. I don't know. And then start adding more things to your plate again. It's kind of where I'm at right now, is that I'm like, oh, you know what? Like I'm better now, and like let's start doing more things. And I can see the pattern starting to sort of emerge. Now, obviously I'm trying to learn from previous things and really keep in mind of like why I believe things led to, you know, this tough time for me. But I suppose that's part of it too. If you can hear a horn blaring in the background here, sorry, somebody's alarm's going off. Anyway, it's kind of like
mine, so I think you're good.
Oh, maybe it was. I don't know. I heard it in my headphones. So I guess I believe what I like to do for me personally is I always, as of right now, I like to push myself as far as I can possibly go. Mm-hmm. Mentally, especially when it comes to a lot of this stuff, even physically, like I run a couple times a week. Like I believe that physical exercise is very much linked to your mental health, right? So for me, it's like, okay, if I'm going to take more on, well, how am I going to balance that out on the other side of like, okay, how am I going to balance that mental load out on the other side, right? And for me, it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to take more on, well, I need to run more, or I need to take more time off. Like there's a scale, and it constantly has to be balanced, right? Like it's work-life balance, whatever. But that's very much how I see it. Whereas if I'm going to put a weight on the one side, what am I going to put on the other side to counteract what I'm about to do? Yep. So that's, again, the visual that I apply to some of the stuff. That's kind of what it is. And there are times where, I mean, obviously it's not a physical thing, so you don't know. Sometimes that weight that you put on is way heavier than what you're putting on the other side, and it will tip. And usually those moments when it tips, you will feel it. And that's the hardest part, is for everybody that comes in a different form. And for me, it led to serious panic attacks with probably, I don't know, 2 to 3 months of agoraphobia after that. And it takes, you know, it took a lot of work to kind of get through that period of time. And it's not the first time in my life that it's ever happened. So for me, it's kind of one of those things where, again, when you're lost and you've kind of conquered this thing once, you know, you can do it again. So luckily I kind of knew some of the general steps that I needed to take. But you feel kind of stupid when you do that to yourself, because you're like, damn it, I put way too much weight on that side and I wasn't counteracting it. Like, it just, I wasn't doing enough. So I don't know, like for me, like it was just like getting really mad at myself. And then it was like at that point of like, all right, let me get better. Let me feel like I can leave my house again. And once I got to that point, I was like, okay, how do I just redesign my life a little bit here? Sorry, I'm really getting into something here that's not so much part of this, but I think you come to these moments where you're like, ooh, it's not working. I got to redesign this thing or this way of doing things.
Yep.
And more often than not, whenever like, again, I can sort of feel these things coming on at this point, and it's like, okay, well, I need to do something. Mm-hmm. For me at that point, it was, okay, I need to reset. I need to stop doing all the things. I need to stop teaching. I need to stop doing Making Midwest. I needed to stop with all the business ideas and just weird ideas. And what I wanted to do was I sold a business during this time too. I wanted to just focus on Made by Things. Mm-hmm. I was like, all right, this is like, even that honestly was too much at that time, but I was like, I can't stop that. So in an ideal world, it's literally stop everything, take a break and reset. But I did all these things and everyone's like, oh, what's going on? Like, you're stopping everything. Like, that's not like you. And it's like, no, it's not. But I pushed way too far and I didn't want to tell anyone the truth, really. Yeah. Which was I simply pushed too hard. And, you know, it took me a good 2 to 3 years after that point to really feel like I was back to normal. But even still, I know that it's there. Like I'm still pushing those boundaries, right? I started adding more things on, different things. But again, all you can do is kind of just try to be as smart as you can, I guess. Yeah. So I think that there are days where you can have a good grip of your mental wellness and then days where you feel like you suck at it. But I think the best thing is honestly just having a plan of some kind. Like, okay, if this happens, okay, well, whatever, doing this. And again, that's easier said than done, especially if you have a job that you are committed to. Having a mental health day sounds great, but it's not always the easiest thing to be able to do, especially as a business owner. I don't get those. And that's fine, right? Like I love this stuff. I love it like a child. I really do. I have fun doing this stuff every single day, but even doing the stuff that you have fun with can drain you if you don't recharge your battery somehow. Yes. Go ahead, Shelley.
It's very difficult because I feel like it's so important that we listen to our bodies and we listen to ourselves. I think that's why it is important for us to take those breaks and actually think about it, because when you are sprinting, you don't really get to notice, when you're running out. I mean, if we continue on with the woods, just thinking about this is like, okay, so if you are in the woods and a mountain lion comes to get you, are you supposed to run from the mountain lion? No, you're supposed to stand there and look bigger. So I think it's important to face whatever fear is there, as opposed to I'm just going to keep running and running and running, because it's going to catch you. At some point, the mountain lion's going to get you. And like speaking from somebody, I have so much anxiety constantly, and I've been able to get to a point where I've weaponized it. It's like my anxiety now can tell me when something is wrong. It's like, okay, this is an issue. I'm seeing a pattern here now. What are my plans? How do I attack this if this becomes something bigger? If I am feeling a lot of burnout, because I used to be like the queen of burnout. It was, ignore my dog. I can hear him in the background. It's not me. It's the dog. But I used to be the absolute queen of burnout, and I didn't realize it. So it was like, okay, I'm going to work constantly all the time. And especially I was, during grad school and working and everything else, it was, you're so busy, you don't feel it at some point. You kind of grow numb to it. And I think it's important to recognize those points, because you will get to the point where everything needs to stop and you do have to stop all of your commitments and you have to take a break. But if you're listening to yourself and you're taking pauses incrementally before any of those big, kind of breakdowns happen, they won't feel as big when you do have those moments. And I think those moments are inevitable, but I think you can help lessen the blow if you're listening to yourself.
Right. Yeah. I think especially things like regular vacations. Mm-hmm. I honestly never feel like taking vacations. I like to work. I want to work.
Yep.
And usually a vacation and planning it just sounds like a hassle to me. And just kind of an annoyance, like whatever. But it's not until I actually take that vacation where I'm like, oh,
yeah,
like I see now. I see how I needed that. So it's like, I very much look at it just like a calendar of like, all right, every like 2 or 3 months, like I need to like go somewhere or stay somewhere else other than my house, like break the normal routine. And I don't know, obviously the longer the vacation, the more it helps. Depending on how many children you take with you and where you go exactly, of course. But just the vacations, if just me and my wife go on a vacation somewhere, we might stay in like a cabin and we just don't go anywhere. We'll hang out. We'll go to the grocery store. But other than that, I'll write, we'll sit on like a little porch or something like that. And it's just quiet. We don't need to talk. We're just,
and that's what you need.
Just let it be quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, I don't know. And those are some of my favorite vacations to have. And again, it's just being able to just take a moment to reflect on like, oh, okay, maybe I've been pushing a little bit hard. And like, here's how I need to kind of re-attack or change my plan of attack, I guess, on certain things. It's basically the same as just, you know what, stop running in the woods. Like you can't see, just sit down on the tree stump for a little bit. Even if you can't see, at least you can relax for a moment. Okay. Let's keep diving into this. I continually find myself trading so much time for little financial gain. Oh my God, yes. I think the saying is something like 80% of your efforts bring you 20% of your revenue or something along those lines. But the thing is, nice dog. But the thing is, you don't really ever know which 80% is actually contributing to that 20%.
Yeah.
There are so many things that I have tried to do over all the years that have led to just crickets and just nothing, that have cost me way more than it ever helped me gain.
Yep.
But it's not so binary usually, where the first time that I did Making Midwest, great example here, where I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do a conference and this is going to be like my way of advertising essentially. Like, while also still like doing some good in the community. Like, this is something I believed in. But you know what? I'll put money into this because you know what? People are going to be lining up at my door to work with me after that. That wasn't the exact thinking, but like it was something along those lines.
Yeah.
And that first year, I'm pretty sure I spent probably $4,000, maybe $5,000 of my own money, like paying people to present and paying for the venue, buying a projector, doing all these different things. And I ended up making like, I don't know, we may have sold $2,000 worth of tickets. And that was a lot of work, a ton of work doing events. We're doing another one right now, in case you didn't know, makingmidwest.com for more information on that. But it was sort of this realization where I was like, oh no, like I'm not going to make money from this idea. I'm losing money and I'm losing my time. Like that's a horrible investment strategy. And I felt terrible about it, but it was probably like a year to maybe 3 later where some of these people that maybe I met there or connections that I made introduced me to somebody else, where I started to be able to see like, wait a minute, like this person's working with me because of Making Midwest. So while initially directly it seemed like a big loss, once I started to like really add this up, I was like, whoa, like we've actually made a lot of money. Like I don't know, relatively, I guess, on the event, or indirectly. And I think that's probably the key word is indirectly, is that no matter what effort you put out there in that world, it may not come back to you directly, but indirectly, I feel like it just always seems to find a way.
Yeah.
To the point where Megan, my wife, used to look at me really funny when I would tell her about some of these big ideas that I had. Again, initially she's like, wait, I don't understand. Like, you think like this is going to do that? And she's like, okay. Like, and I think she still questions some of the things that I do, but not nearly as much. And I think it's because she also sees like, okay, it's not always like direct results for all the different things that you do. Like, for instance, if I'm like, hey, you know what? I want to make a kid's book. Like, do I need to make money on the kid's book directly? It would be nice. But if it doesn't, the cool part is that, oh, we've done a book. Now we can do books. We can help other people with making kids' books. All of a sudden, oh, now we do augmented reality. Like, there's so much indirect stuff that can help financially later on. So it's tough to say like, hey, I'm spending so much time and I'm not making any money. Well, I guess first thing that I would say is it takes time. We're selling bigger ticket items here, not like things at the end cap of a grocery store, right? Where someone can impulsively buy it. That's not how this works. I generally say it takes about 2 years to see truthfully how the effort that you're putting in is actually paying off.
Yep.
So I'm in a rhythm right now where the effort that I'm putting in right now, it's not for right now. It's for 2 years from now, because I don't know. Like I'm going to try every little thing that I possibly can. Anytime that I've seen kind of an increase in people wanting to work with us or project sizes, whatever, it's not because of what I did at that moment. It's because of what I did 2 years ago.
Yep.
And again, it can be more, but 2 years is generally what I'm looking at. So I guess that's the thing that I would say is you have to be patient. But after 2 years, if you're doing something and you still haven't seen a result from it, you need to change and do something else.
Yep.
Because that thing clearly isn't working at that moment. And I guess that kind of goes back to the idea of like the path that you're running down, right? If you go 2 years in the dark, it's probably time to kind of go back a little bit. Maybe you've been running in circles. It's time to take a break and reassess. Like just walk to clarity at that point, wherever the closest clarity stop is. And that's another thing that I think really scares people away from the idea of starting a business. Is it actually is a pretty common thing for people to say that like, hey, don't expect any profits for 2 years. Like if you're going to start a business, plan on going 2 years without making a single dollar. And maybe that's a little excessive, but that's a common thing with all businesses, restaurants especially. And there's a talk that I give. I don't give it often because it really depends on the audience, where I show the financial returns of Made by Things for the last 9 years. I do actually plan on doing something similar to this during Making Midwest. We're doing Creative Business School, makingmidwest.com, to learn more. But I don't do it I'm not trying to show off or anything like that, but it's a bit of a hockey stick curve where the first 7 years are relatively flat or actually going downward.
Yeah.
And something sort of clicks at a certain point. and starts going up. And every time I look at it, I'm like, God, like I'm so happy that I just trusted that the work that I was putting in was going to lead to something.
Yeah.
I don't know. So like I like to show people that because I'm like, this should be your expectations. Not that you do this for 10 minutes and all of a sudden you win the lottery, basically. Like this stuff takes work. It takes a lot of failing. I don't want to say failing. But like in a way, they're like small failures, I guess, where you're like, just moments where you feel like you need to pivot because something's not working.
So much trial and error.
Right. And, people, when I do that talk, people still like ask like, what happened at this moment? I'm like, sit down. Cause I have no idea. Like, I don't know. Like I can tell you what things happened during that time that helped, but like overall, I don't have the answer for it. And I know that people don't like to see that, but that's how this works, is when you commit yourself to figuring out answers and kind of not giving up. Again, it should still be fun, right? If it's not fun, then maybe you're facing too much resistance and maybe you need to change a path, whatever. But for me, I guess that's the thing, like just all the little things that I did up to that point. There was so much work that went into that. And there was probably a lot of it that was meaningless and I should have never wasted my time on, but I don't care. Again, I don't look back now and say like, oh no, I spent too much time on this. Because again, it's like, if I can figure out the Edison quote of, I didn't fail 10,000 times, I just found 10,000 ways to not make a light bulb. And I feel like that's it, right? Like, figure out the 10,000 ways to not run a business how you think it should be done or something.
Thinking about that, that patience, you very rarely make big changes in life expecting, instant gratification. I think that so for instance, if you decide to start a new workout, you're probably not going to see the payoff in the first week, the first month,
right.
Maybe even the first 6 months. It's going to take some time. And I think we've gotten so used to like instant gratification, from, seeing people's lives on social media. And, we're able to see, here was that workout and here was the payoff within, a year, condensed into a supercut of 30 seconds. And we forget all of the time and effort that went into that. And it's so important, though, to be able to keep that patience, because it will happen eventually. Because everything that you're doing right now will have an effect on what happens to you in the future, whether that be, something really, really great, or maybe not a lot comes of it, but you've still learned from that. Those experiences, those mistakes, those trials and errors, you are learning from those, and you're not going to make those same mistakes again, because as long as you're not running through the woods in the dark and you're taking those breaks and you're sitting on the stump, you can sit back and pay attention to those moments and learn from them as you're going.
Right. And, along with that patience, it takes discipline, right? Mm-hmm. You have to force yourself to sorry, now he's at the yelling portion of things. You have to force yourself to do the things that you don't necessarily want to do at that moment.
Yeah.
There is a resilience, a discipline to running any sort of business that is required. Mm. Again, it's probably the reason why I run. I don't run because I'm trying to be healthy, honestly. I run because it's difficult to do, and I'm practicing discipline more than I'm practicing for a race or anything like that.
Yeah.
Because it sucks, right? I've been running for, I don't know, it's been 11 or 12 years now. Usually at least twice a week for that entire time. And I hate it. Like, the beginning portion of running, of like, okay, now I need to get ready. I like get my shorts on and like get my, get the music figured out, stretch and then start running. It's too cold. It's too hot. It's never the right temperature to be running in.
Yeah.
The first half mile of every run that I go on is miserable. But then that next half mile, when it starts to be a little bit easier, and then it's like, okay, well now I can like process different things that are going on in my life. I get that clarity.
Yeah.
That again, just same as being on vacation, where it's a pain in the ass actually to go on vacation, but once you do it, you can kind of see at that moment. Yeah. So it's like the middle part of me running where I'm like, okay, now I know why I do this now. Like I remember why. And the last half mile or so, I'm like, I feel great. As soon as I'm done and, after I take a shower and I'm ready for the day, like I feel amazing the rest of the day. And again, it all started because I was like, no, I don't want to do this. Don't want to do this. But again, you get to reap those rewards when you can see, I don't know, you start to see those results over time. Again, this first few times that I went outside and started running. So this is totally off topic now, but like the very first time that I ever went for a run, like I'll never ever forget it. I was in college at the time. Things, just family mess, just a whole bunch of stuff was going on. And I was talking to a roommate and I was like, we like saw somebody running and I was like, it can't be enjoyable, right? Like it just looks miserable. And we kind of told each other, you know what? We should start running together. So it was 2007, I'm pretty sure, is when the first time that I ran was. And I set my alarm clock for like 5:00 in the morning. I had class at 8. So I'm like, all right, here we go. Knock on his door. No answer. Going alone. So yeah. So I get my running stuff on and I stretch and I'm like, all right, here we go. I open the door. It's 18 degrees outside. It is snowing. The sidewalks are not plowed. And I'm like, you know what? This is going to suck, but I'm going to do it. And I go out there and I start running. I literally got maybe 2 houses down before I'm like, nope, this isn't for me. And I turned around, went back inside, went back to bed. And that was the first time that I ever ran. And I was like, I don't know. I guess I felt some guilt from that because I was like, you know what? Like, I really want to commit to this. So I tried it again when it got a little bit warmer outside. And it was something that stuck for me, right? So from the beginning, it was always practice discipline. And I think that's the same is true with running a business. Even on the days where maybe I don't have a whole lot to do, it's what do I need to be doing right now? What should I be doing? How can I gain an advantage if I use this time to my advantage, right? And sometimes it's like, you know what? We need more work. What am I going to do? Am I going to cold call people? I don't know. Let me try it and see, those days are gone now, but like I did that, right? Like I will do whatever I had to do to find success doing this stuff. Mm-hmm. So again, like I talk a lot about like the running aspect of this stuff of me personally, but like those things are so intertwined. Yeah. Like just my physical wellness, my mental health, and the success of the business, truthfully. You could run those charts over top of each other and see how they correlate. I've never told anyone this before, but like there is a correlation between how much I run and I don't want to say just revenue of the company, but like how good I felt like the business was performing, I guess. So at that point, once I can figure that stuff out, I'm like, oh, okay. like, this is a new tool that I have to be able to, like, in my mind, it tells me, okay, the more that I run, the better the business is going to do. That's where I'm now at. Again, don't tell anyone this, but like, because even though they are unrelated, right? It doesn't make any sense. But at the same time, for me, it's a correlation that I've been able to find, and I'm going to keep riding that, I guess, because why not? Anyway, let's keep going with the question here. Guess I'm reaching out to see how you deal with running a business while profiting and having fun with what you do. I like this little conclusion here. Again, you have to love this stuff. There's a lot of lines of work or industries that are similar where you really have to love what you're doing to do this stuff. Everyone feels like, oh, just because they're doing that thing means that they love it. And that's not necessarily the truth.
Yep.
The truth is it's really easy to fall out of love with the stuff that we do if you don't make constant changes along the way. So the thing that you were really happy doing one time, for me, for instance, in the beginning, 3D modeling was the thing that made me the happiest in the world. Mm-hmm. And I always told people, like, I just want to do 3D modeling all day long. Like, that's all I want. I don't want to deal with clients. I don't want to deal with this stuff. But over time, it started to change where I'm like, no, this is just kind of getting exhausting. Yep. And again, that to the people out there that do that for 20, 30 years, great. But for me, I can tell at that moment, that's not how this is going to work. And I needed to find a way to sort of adapt through this stuff.
Yeah.
And to me, what's always been fun is the constant changing, the constant having to learn something new has always been the fun thing for me. Today, I have just as much fun 3D modeling years ago as I do working through payroll or just figuring out financial stuff through a spreadsheet. Not many people will actually admit that, but like it's all fun to me. Rewriting the handbook because it's, I have a better way of making this a better workplace for people. That's fun to me. And again, I get it if it's not fun to other people, but like, whatever, I don't care. So I think the biggest thing is there is that fun aspect of things. And yeah, to me, I have to be challenged. I imagine that most people are the same way, where you got to be constantly challenging yourself if you want to keep having fun doing things. And the profiting aspect of things, again, I can't always control that. Obviously, as a business owner, you want to profit massively off of everything that you do. But that's just not really how it works. Some years you might just be like, whoa, that was cool. And then other years you're like, oh, that sucked. Yeah. But I don't know. For me, it's like, do we live to fight another year? And live to have this journey for another year? And if that's the case, like, I'm happy with that. I'm cool with that. I don't try to figure out what the future looks like necessarily. Like, I don't have a 5-year, 10-year plan of any sort. My only plan that I've ever had in this industry was I want to be able to make money creatively. It's literally it. I guess what I would say is it takes work, right?
Yeah.
It takes work to be able to do all this stuff. It takes work to see a profit of any sort. And you hope that when those two things happen, that you are also having a lot of fun. But it doesn't always work that simply. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's important to try to understand what those boundaries are. What are you really willing to do, and what are you not willing to do?
Yeah.
And at a certain point, for I think some people that have to stop pursuing the entrepreneurial journey, I think it gets to a point for them where it's just not worth it. It's not worth all the effort for what they feel like they're getting from this.
Yep.
And again, I get it. If you get to a point like that, like, yeah, you have to make a decision, and it might be a tough decision that nobody likes.
Yeah.
we have a friend that had to stop running his business because it was destroying his mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And not just like he had a couple of bad days here and there. It was literally killing him.
Yeah.
And he made one of the hardest decisions that I think that anyone would have to make, especially for having a successful business.
Yeah.
So it had nothing to do with the financial side of things. It was all about just the well-being side of things. I've literally never seen anyone make that decision before. It's the first time I've never even thought that someone would make that decision before, but to see someone actually do it, like that takes some real strength right there.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding and acknowledgement and discipline. Like, yeah, I don't know. It takes everything to be able to do that kind of stuff. So, all right, let's get into some final thoughts here. Shelby, you go first.
Yeah, I think going into this of, how do you run a successful business, profiting and having fun? I think a lot of it for me, and we talk about this a lot, is like being a creative is being a problem solver. The act of being creative is oftentimes the act of problem solving, especially when you work in, marketing and advertising. Your main job usually is to go through and problem solve. And whether that's, whether that is within a very creative space in the way we traditionally think about it, if you're doing 3D modeling, or if you're writing a script, or, designing a campaign, or if you're running the business and you're finding creative ways to, adjust payroll or find new ways to make this a better place to work. It's all creativity. It's creativity in different fonts. And I think that's okay. And I think one of the most important things you can do is learn how to make the best out of those creative moments and really, really play with it and, put more of you into it. I think your business should kind of be, and I know that this might be toxic, but I think it should be a little bit of an extension of you because it is your baby. And I think it's important to be able to see yourself within that and your creative problem solving within it.
Yeah, I think you said it really well there. And that's why I guess I always kind of tilt my head a little bit at the conversation of like work-life balance.
Yeah.
For a business owner, it's really tough to balance all the things.
Yeah.
And to me, I've never really seen, honestly, that as a scale of any sort. It's really just like, hey, this is my life. And I don't know, like, I guess there is a balance of sorts that needs to happen there. But like you said, that like the business is, it feels like I am myself, right? My personal being, but it does feel like Made by Things is an extension of who I am.
Yeah.
And I very much treat that just as personally as I would to anything else, friends, family members, like, it's a very personal thing. And I think that's another thing. And maybe that's just a generational thing that's sort of new.
Mm-hmm.
But in the beginning, I tried to do business the way I thought it should be done, that I saw other people do it. And it didn't feel right. I tried wearing the nice shirts. I tried doing my hair. Like, yeah. Again, like, it's just things like that though. Like that is why I wear the hat. It doesn't get much more personal or me than being able to wear my hat, because that's where I'm comfortable. And, if you are going to run a company like that, like the clients that we have very much appreciate the personal touch on things. They don't want that. Like, they don't want the button up fake version of things.
Yeah.
Nor would I, right? And that's, I don't know, it gets into a whole separate topic altogether, but it should be personal. So my final thought, real quick, all I'm going to do, honestly, is just read the LinkedIn post that I sent out this morning because I think the timing is actually quite perfect on this. Everyone wants to know my secret to growing a creative team and doing big projects, but they don't often like the answer. And that answer is: work at it from scratch without accruing any debt so that you can stay nimble while giving yourself the space to learn one thing at a time for 10 plus years. In that time, you constantly over-deliver in an effort to push yourself or push your portfolio to a place where you're finally able to be considered for the opportunities that you want, all the while coping with the reality that the opportunities you thought existed aren't what they seemed, and adapting your goals and expectations every single day until you eventually realize that it's all about the journey and learn to love that instead of the destination. Yeah, that's the ramble version of what it feels like in the mind of a madman. But that's it, man. There's no shortcuts. There's no easy way of doing this stuff. You might find some early viral success early on, but again, when you put 10 years of your time and effort into something, you have to trust, especially financially, that it's going to be rewarding. And along the way, you might need to adapt a few things, including your own expectations and how you're going about doing things. And that's ultimately the answer to all this stuff. That's much easier said than done. So, all right. It's been fun. Getting a little heated in this one.
I know.
Anyway, hope you all enjoyed this. And if you didn't, I hope you leave us 5 stars anyway. Try a new podcast. I don't know. So, all right, that's all I got. Thank you all, and love you. Bye.
The CMD-Z Show is created by Made by Things. And if you have a question you would like us to discuss, you can send a message at CMD-Z.show. And if you like what you hear, leave a review. We'll see you next week with a brand new show.